Hello and welcome to the Book of Leaves podcast. My name is Cara Carney and I am your host. Hello and welcome to episode 63 of Book of Leaves. This is a podcast where I interview people in Ireland or with a connection to Ireland who are doing something good for the planet in some way. And the whole idea is we get to know their story, what basically made them eco-conscious, and we learn from them and take a leaf from their book or many leaves from the book to add to our own way of eco-friendly living, which is where the name comes from. And in this episode we are going to be talking about hemp. This is a subject I've wanted to talk about for so long, so I thought about getting in touch with the Hemp Cooperative Ireland, and Freya Bartels is the amazing farmer that gave me her time for this interview. So I hope you guys enjoy. Everything as per usual that we mention is linked in the show notes, including the volunteer network she first experienced permaculture on, which sounds so cool, so I'm definitely going to check that out. So if you like what you hear, please do rate this review, especially if you rate this review, leave a review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening to Apple Podcasts, that would be very, very helpful. And don't forget to share with a friend or recommend it to someone or share it on your social media. That would be very, very, very helpful in spreading the good word of all the eco-friendly people in Ireland that I've been talking to. You can also support the podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/Book of Leaves, or buy me a coffee. I have recently subscribed to Zencaster, which is $18 a month, and that's how I'm getting to interview people virtually, so it's kind of helping me a little bit save time, but it's costing $18 a month, and not to mention there's website hosting fees, and I mean my time is the last thing that I'm thinking of. But if anyone would be able to or would like to support the podcast in that way, if you would buy me a coffee or a pint if we ever met in person, then you can do that on Patreon or once off on buymeacoffee.com. And thank you so much to the patrons who already support me. It is very much appreciated. The last thing I want to plug before I hand you over to Freya is two upcoming events. One being the Climate Arts Festival called Future Limerick that's happening in Limerick around the 18th of May, and I'm doing a talk there with Mancon Magan and Saoirse Exton. So if you can come along to that, that would be amazing. I'll be linking that everywhere on my social media and in the show notes for the next little while. Loads of other great events happening as part of that as well. And also on the 25th of June, that weekend, Cultivate are hosting the Elements of Change Festival, which I'll hopefully be involved with, but either way, that's going to be an amazing eco-friendly festival based in Cloughjordan in Tipperary. I hear it's going to be a very small affair with a maximum of 1,000 people, so yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that. And the IPCC report also came out last Monday. I won't go into that here. I will just divert your attention to the Climate Alarm Clock podcast episode on that, in which they break it down in terms that everyday people like me can understand. So give that a listen if you are interested in knowing what it says and you want to know what you can do about it. And yeah, it's just a very enjoyable episode given the gravity of the information that's in the report. Alright, that is the little updates from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview with Freya. Catch you after. Okay, Freya, thank you so much for joining me on the Book of Leaves podcast. It is so lovely to have someone to talk all about hemp here. I am probably too excited about this subject. So thank you for being here. Can you start by maybe introducing yourself to listeners and also me? Like, we've never met before. It's our first time chatting. So I don't know, let us know a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, a bit of essence of Freya, if you will.
Fantastic. That's no problem. So my name is Freya Bartels and I live in the west of Ireland in County Mayo, in what we like to think of as the centre of the universe in Tormacady. It is fantastic here. It's the side of a lake. It's the Partry Mountains, terribly marginal land. It's all sheep and hills. But so I moved out here after I graduated college in 2020 from Earth Science. So no graduation. And Trinity sort of had the first cases of COVID. So we were effectively kicked off campus and shipped off to our parents' homes or wherever you could go. And so I ended up back at my parents and I started working on an estate. They have a big garden, so I was their gardener. And then they offered me a permanent job in September as sort of a regenerative agriculture / regenerative soil, all these sort of things overlapping. And now we're working on growing hemp and trying some, we use, mushroom compost instead of chemical fertilizer, this sort of thing. So we're doing a lot of organic projects and rewilding a bog, this sort of thing. And that's how I got into hemp then. So there you go.
That's amazing. So you ended up studying earth science. So was obviously going into college, the environment and something that was something that you cared about already. But like, did you have an aha
Totally.
moment in life? Was it like a documentary or something, or were you always that way? Was growing up in Mayo and maybe your parents, were they kind of inspirational and like raising eco-conscious children, or how did you become interested in earth science?
So I went vegetarian when I was 12, but that was because of Phoebe Buffet from Friends.
No
So there was nothing
way! Oh my god,
environmental
I
about
was
that at
we're
all.
the same. Well, it wasn't because of Phoebe
No
Buffet, but
way!
I went veggie because growing up in Wexford, my parents just never lied about like where the food and the
Yeah.
plate came from, and I'd be like, "This is a cow, right?" And they're like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to eat a
I
cow," and
don't
they're
want
like,
to eat
"Okay."
that.
That's
See, I
amazing.
was
Okay.
like, I want to be more like Phoebe, so much less cool than yours there. But so yeah, that kind of went on, and then I had horses for a while. We had two lovely horses, and then after a while, it just seemed a bit crazy to be eating animals, and all that started making sense in my head. Then the whole environmental consciousness was just spiraling until I was 16. Then I went vegan. So that's been 8 years now. I'm 24 now. And I would never, ever consider going back. It's just the more you read about it, the more convinced I become. And yeah, then I went off volunteering in Wicklow. There's a place out there called Shrina Bandy where it's all eco-conscious people, and they have a thing I didn't know at the time called woofers, all these lovely volunteers from all over the world. So we're there sharing ideas, and one of them was mad into permaculture. So then I went off to Austria and Panama and all over the world studying permaculture, but studying as in just living with people who did it already. That was totally an aha moment, just the way people can get food from land that looks like it's not tended. It looks wild and yet it's cultivated. I could not get over how people were doing this all over the world. So in a way that was going to be my plan until I got offered the permanent job here. So now we're sort of doing something a little bit like that. We're kind of trying to go into a bit of rewilding slash eco ways of creating food, maybe having a brand at the estate, that sort of thing. Yeah, that was
Amazing.
it.
That is
Traveling.
really cool. I'd love to see, something like a food forest or something in person. I mean, I've lived in the city for like 10 years now, but I
Yeah,
recently got into a discussion with a farmer who was like, "How else are we supposed to do it?" And I was like, "Have you never heard of a food forest?" There's so many, like a couple of documentaries have kind of opened my eyes to the way monocultures, really are a thing of the past. The fact that we're how many thousands of years old as a
I know.
civilization and that has never changed. Our
Yeah,
technology has changed all the time, and really, if we just go back to basics and have everything kind of grown together, you get so much more out of it. Um,
totally. Oh my gosh. I mean, there's stuff coming out of India as well now. The German Times reports on all these lovely hippie things. And gosh, there's literally barren land around irrigation channels. Everything's terrible. And some lad has an acre in the middle with a few mango trees to provide shade. And the change is just huge. He's growing the same thing, but just a little bit more biodiversity. And it's just insane that
yeah,
we somehow forgot that is wild.
Yeah, it's really it's mind-boggling. And I saw somewhere on the internet that getting food forests is something that you're also interested in. You did an interview or something, or found an article with your name on it anyway when I was researching for the podcast, and it was like, oh,
Oh
Freya's
God.
into food forests and everything like that. And it is just something
Yeah,
that like it just makes sense. And like I guess the downside is it needs a little bit of time to
totally.
grow, but
So there's loads of downsides. There's loads of downsides. I mean, if you want to produce food that's cheap the way it is now, you need to be able to produce it so that you can harvest it in no time. And it needs to be the same thing so that your harvester is picking the same thing. If you're harvesting by hand, I mean, there's so many farms that have zero profit because harvesting by hand is too expensive. So
Mm.
it's being done on a large scale is just not an option for farmers right now. They'd never turn a profit, and that's it's not applicable at all. I mean, they're trying agroforestry. There's quilches schemes and things like this you could tap into where they'll set up rows of trees on your fields, and that's fine for kind of sheep and cattle. But I mean, if we wanted to change the way they grow wheat or corn or soy, that's just not going to happen with current harvesting practices or the way we pay farmers.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
this our
exactly.
expectation of having really cheap food is just, and then it
Totally.
ends up like a third of it goes to waste anyway. It's like, what
Yes.
are we doing?
Oh God. Don't even start. I know we end up doing this. They're like, I'll just chuck it away because it's been
Yeah,
on the shelf for 2 days.
I
I
know. But I
know.
think it could be really hopeful if, say, if there was more people doing it at smaller scales, if people with
Yeah.
like in the country who have like unused. My dad, he's been paying a mortgage for God knows how long on a tiny little cottage in Wexford, which is where I grew up, and he's got
Wow.
maybe half an acre across the road that he's never ever used. He's not a farmer. He lets the neighbor's horse come in and eat things sometimes.
That's
But I'm like,
lovely.
which is cool. And he had a friend of his put some beehives in there. But I'm like, you could make a really cool little like food forest or
Yes.
something. And he was like, off you go,
Totally.
Cara. And I'm like, oh, it's too far away. But
Oh
but
gosh,
yeah,
but like
if
what's
loads of people had did something like that, maybe with like little pockets of land that they have, I'd
yeah.
love to see that.
Community what would you call them? Community box schemes, that sort of thing. There's a small farm, it's harvested by hand, and the distribution circle is 10 kilometers, not further than that. Totally viable, absolutely fantastic. People come in, pick it up. It's not, it doesn't need to be packaged into plastic all the same for Tesco.
Mm,
Then that works. The farmer can sort that out. But that's really asking a lot of, most people would go to this shop and get their lettuce and their tomatoes, but then they'd still go to Tesco for their
exactly.
lentils, beans, rice, all of these big crops. So, oh God, even just a shift in that direction, though, would be
Would
fantastic.
be
I sound
so
like
cool.
I'm fighting against it. I'm
No,
so into this.
no,
But
I
just it's
know.
important to be realistic as
Yeah.
well. This is why it hasn't happened.
Yeah, yeah, but there are some kind of community garden is a yeah community garden schemes. Is that what they're called? Where people
Yeah,
can kind of like pay. They find it's like a subscription service, and they'll give a farmer a fee, and kind of whatever vegetables grow, they're part of.
yeah, that's
And
it
those exist
seasonally
in
as well.
Ireland,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, we're here to
Yes,
talk
back to
about
hemp.
hemp.
Exactly. We've
But it's
covered the
good. I
basics
think
now.
I think it's good to get just kind of as many juicy ideas flowing as possible. But
Totally.
I've never had someone who has worked with hemp on the podcast before, and I've seen a couple of things on social media and online about how good it is, and it's almost kind of marketed as too good to be true.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
I guess to start off, can you explain what hemp is?
Yes, so hemp is a cousin of cannabis, marijuana, that everybody knows. So there's lots of types of cannabis. This one is Cannabis sativa L, so that's a subspecies. One of the main differences between it and marijuana is the THC level. So industrial hemp has zero point 0.2 or less percent THC, while whatever you smoke would have much higher than that for a psychoactive effect. And industrial cannabis can have a higher CBD level, but that's not necessary. The main thing is that it has a huge amount of fiber. So it has a very thick stalk with a hollow center. And so we'll divide that up. The stalk is this shape, and around the outside is the fiber. And in the middle is a thing called shiv or hurd. And these are used in industry. So you could use that for building and insulation. So that's what cannabis is. That's what hemp is. And it's been used for thousands of years. I was reading today, there's since 1100 AD, there's been hemp grown in Ireland, and probably beforehand they just couldn't write it down, or if
Grown
they
in
did, we lost
Ireland.
it. Yeah,
Wow.
isn't that mad? So it's well entrenched. Everyone's been using it for ropes and sailcloth since forever, basically.
That's okay. So yeah, and I guess the thing to emphasize for anyone who doesn't know, it is not psychoactive.
There you go.
People
Exactly.
who
That's the
grow
difference.
hemp for farming is completely different to the
Totally
other
different.
stuff. Yeah, because I think that
Yeah.
does a lot of people, just presume, oh God, there's the hemp wearing hippies again and whatever, and you're
Totally.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
You can
there's
just smoke your t-shirt, away you go. Yeah. No, so
like
it's funny. Totally. The perception is that they're the same plant, which is fine because I'm just assuming people haven't heard about it. Why would they have researched this? But that's changing. And even, at a higher level in government now, it's being taken totally seriously. There's no confusion there anymore, which is great.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned there that, the different parts of it can be used for so many different things. Like it can be so strong. I've seen people using it for what, like, as you say, construction, like various parts of
Yeah.
construction and whatever. But I guess, how do you grow it? Because I mean, we're already talking about monocultures there,
Yeah.
which are quite bad for the environment. So how does this grow, and is it actually sustainable?
Yes, so this is really interesting. I'm really glad you're asking that. So the way you grow it is the same way as with a monoculture crop. So you would plow and harrow your soil, which, as we know, releases carbon, destroys mycorrhizal networks. It's not a good thing, but this is how you prepare a seed bed. So you plow and harrow, and then you spread your seed. Are you hearing this hail?
Was that hail?
That's
It
hail.
sounded like someone like folding plastic or something in the background. Oh my gosh, I've got a nice little drizzle here in Dublin.
Oh my gosh, it's
Wow.
been getting crazy, so you might get this later. But
That's okay. That's okay.
yeah, actually, it's getting so loud. This is
Wow,
insane.
that's
The
so
room is
loud.
shaking.
Oh my gosh.
It sounds like someone's throwing stones at the window. Anyway, I'm completely distracted. You have to cut all this
Not
out.
at all. No, I mean, it's all, hey, we're all into the weather on this podcast. That's
Love that.
totally
This is such
okay.
climate. What's going on with the climate? But anyway, yes. So back to that because it's fascinating. So you have your soil which has been disturbed. Hemp grows really fast. So this is one of the cool things with it, that you don't need to use herbicides in the same way that you need to use herbicides for wheat, or especially for wheat where you have to kill it off with Roundup. There's a lot of really beneficial things to the fact that hemp outgrows its weeds. So there's little need to be chasing after them, but you don't need to spray it. So that's number one good thing. Number two is there's a difference between things that directly affect the surrounding environment and carbon sequestration. So when someone says hemp is good for the environment, they might be meaning that it sequesters more carbon than any other crop. It's more than a forest, more than an acre of woodland, up to 4 times as much, because when you grow an acre of hemp, you grow it every year. So if you wanted to make paper out of a forest, you have to wait 20 years and then pulp the wood. Or with an acre of hemp, you get that supply every year. It's less, obviously, than a
So
forest.
it's new plants growing, taking in carbon to
Yeah.
grow. That's wild. The fact that
And so
they can
then you
actually take in
harvest.
more than a forest.
Yeah, exactly. And sure, a forest takes forever to set up and provides so much habitat, while hemp not providing long-term habitat. So there's no one in there who's going to be harvested away. No one who's built a home and is going to lose it. It
Hmm.
provides pollen for bees, which is exciting. It's not nectar, so there's no flower that needs a bee to pollinate it, but it has male pollen, which is wind pollinated to the female flower. And bees use this pollen as well. But yeah, that's how you would grow it. So you would plow, harrow, scatter your seed, and then you have to roll it to keep the soil to get a nice covering over each seed. And then it takes up to 5 days to germinate. Your soil temperature needs to be above 11 degrees. And then it takes off, shoots up, and within 3 months you have 6 foot tall plants, depending on the species you choose. And then away you go. You're harvesting at maybe 120 days. It depends. All of this depends on your type and what you're harvesting for, and is it seed, is it fiber? All these times vary. There you
Wow.
go.
That's, yeah, just the carbon thing is still blowing my mind, because I mean, once you harvest something, they say when you cut down a forest, carbon is released again. But when you harvest hemp, because it's not like being burned, that carbon, am I right in saying, like, that carbon isn't necessarily being released? It's still stored
Yes.
in whatever the hemp is put to.
This is it. So totally. And when you make a wooden house, you store the carbon from the trees in the wooden house. And when you make hempcrete, so this is the concrete that you can make out of hemp, but it's not used in the same way as concrete. It's used as insulation at the moment.
Mm.
It has antifungal and anti-fire resistant properties. So this is mixing the hemp shiv, not the fiber on the outside, just the shiv with lime, and planting that on the inside of your house. And that absorbs more carbon throughout its lifetime and locks in the carbon of the hemp. So let's say your house stays for 100 years. That's the carbon from 1 year's worth of hemp growth stored for 100 years. That's why it's such a good sequestration crop.
Yeah.
Now, if you just harvest your seed and you plow in your fiber into the ground, which a lot of people have been doing as a soil improver, that's the same thing. It's stored in the soil. So it's a bit different, obviously, because there's degassing and there's decomposition. All of this brings some carbon back into the atmosphere, but
Sure.
it's still kept down. So it's not the same as chipping wood, turning it into plywood, or burning wood obviously is different. But
Yeah,
they're
which
thinking
really.
of making hemp briquettes, but still.
Okay. We need to stop that now. I'm joking. Yeah, there's. I
No,
mean,
it's
sure, we'll always
interesting.
find. It'll probably be a case of figuring out all the different things that we can do, and then going, okay, what can we? What's good?
What
What
makes
should
sense?
stick around? Yeah, I mean,
Totally.
the insulation. I had a look at some videos online, and that just makes perfect sense because I mean, the insulation mostly in houses now. I mean, in fairness, new builds are typically all trying to be really eco-friendly and lower energy consumption and whatnot, but we still have, if someone is just doing up their attic or doing a shed at home, they're just going to go out and buy what's cheap or readily available on the market, which are like
Yeah.
all these synthetic materials. They can be quite chemical heavy as well, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. As we saw, there's a case in London where the house burned down, because sometimes that can happen. I'm not trying to say anything there, but
Oh, I did no, I
there's
didn't hear.
issues
I
with,
didn't hear about that. So that was an
yeah,
insulation problem, was it?
it was an insulation problem. And the good thing with hemp insulation is that it is fire resistant. So recently in the States, there's an Instagram account I follow, and a guy had a warehouse full of hemp blocks for insulation,
Hmm.
and the warehouse burned down and the blocks were completely fine. So he was
No
like, this is
way.
actually so good for business because people are seeing that it doesn't burn.
Yeah. I
So
wonder if he
yeah,
set fire to the warehouse as a
yeah.
marketing tactic.
That's true. I should comment this. Like, you did that
Yeah.
yourself.
Imagine. It's so interesting though.
Yeah.
So creating insulation is one thing that you can do for it. Can you do multiple different things with the same kind of hemp? Like, is there much left
Mhm.
over, say, if that's what you're creating? Can some of it be used for, I don't know, spinning fiber or something like that? Or what other
Yeah.
uses can there be for hemp as well grown here?
So that's another good question, because people will say, oh, one plant will grow flowers, seeds, textiles, and insulation and building materials. It's fantastic. One plant, one harvest. But you do grow different types of hemp for different purposes. So, say if
Mm.
you're growing for CBD, it's a very different horticultural process also to get high CBD flowers. So, and also if you harvest flowers, you obviously won't get seeds because they haven't been pollinated. So that's a totally different plant, and the fiber is poor quality. So people don't, or the fiber, the shift, the whole stalk, people wouldn't go using that for anything other than maybe, I don't know, for briquettes or something. Really, they probably just put it into their compost and have it as part of the soil the next year.
Sure.
Yeah. So then you have your seed varieties, which can overlap with the fiber varieties. But if you're really in it for seed, you'd probably go for a seed heavy variety, which can have a poorer quality fiber as well. So people who grow for seed would probably only grow for seed and again plow in the stalk into the soil. And then you've got your fiber gang who might have a few seeds and probably would take those for seed, because why not? But if it's too little, because you've got a plant that's put all its energy into this massive stalk, it's 15 foot tall, it's a totally different animal. That's where you get your really high quality shiv, really high yield from per field. You can get 4 tons or more per acre of hemp. So that's a lot. That's in, I think Irish Trees, they had 10 tons per hectare. So that's
Whoa.
very good going. They had huge
That's a
plants growing
couple
in
of
there.
elephants. That's a lot.
A lot of it. Yeah, there you go. And you can't make any of these things out of elephants. So we shouldn't be encouraging that one at all. But
No.
yeah, so you've got this huge difference in the plants, firstly. So you've got to pick what you're growing for. So if you're growing for fiber, and you have to put it through a machine called a decorticator. So these are really big machines. It's a factory. Your plant goes through there. The fiber is separated from the herd, and then you've got two products. You've got your fiber and your herd. So the herd can be used for insulation or plyboard, these sort of things, sort of construction materials. And your fiber, if it's good enough quality, you can spin it. So that will become textiles, either heavy textiles like sort of canvas, ropes, that sort of thing, or if you manage to really refine them, you can be making clothes, because that needs to be very soft. People have a high standard for clothing these
Sure.
days. So just random fibers torn off a hemp plant's not going to do it for most of us.
Yeah, they don't want to go around wearing like flower sacks, scratchy
Yes.
sacks. They want. And in fairness, I
Yeah.
felt a couple of there's a couple of hemp shops in Oh my god, look at this rainbow. Wait, hold on a
Whoa.
sec.
Show me
I don't
this
know if
now.
you could see that. Can you see that? Rainbow, like,
Oh gosh, I see it
can you
now.
see that? It's
Oh my
I
gosh.
have never seen a rainbow like that. It almost looks like there's two
Stop the
rainbows.
lights.
There is like two rainbows,
It's a
but that
double
was
rainbow. Yeah, there's one inside.
it's like, but there's like, what the hell? It's so strong. It's so luminous that
That is fabulous.
I just had to, we're getting all the weather today, guys.
We are. I've got sun now as well coming in through the window.
Yay! Maybe you'll get, God, I've never seen, that is so cool. Sorry, I got distracted. The hail and the
Don't be
rainbows.
sorry. I love that. You were living in the moment. It's perfect.
Sorry now, what was we saying at all there
We actually
about?
managed to finish that off pretty well though before.
Oh, nice, nice. We were talking. Oh yeah,
Yes.
about all the different types of plants. Oh yeah, people don't want to go wearing scratchy clothes.
Yes. Yes.
I've been to a couple of hemp shops, and they sell, they sell clothes made from hemp, and it does feel lovely. I have a bamboo
Yeah.
t-shirt, and it's the same kind of really soft feeling, and I think it has the same antifungal, antibacterial qualities as well that the insulation has, doesn't it? If it's woven
Yeah. Yeah.
into fiber, which is pretty cool. As for where it can be grown, does it need, the typical fields that other kind of crops can are grown in? Or, a lot of farmers will say that in Ireland we have so much, land that's only for goats and only for grazing and whatnot. Does it work in places like
Yeah.
that, or what kind of environment does it need?
That's a good one. I'll unpack that slowly. So you have arable land, and then you have your pasture land. It's called pasture land, and that maybe 2/3 of that is unsuitable for growing crops. So you have your arable land, and in Ireland that tends to be south or in the east of the western counties. So East Mayo would be a lot better off than we are here in the Partry Mountains. But last year we grew hemp on two separate acres. One of them, the top of a hill with kind of poor soil results and heavy clayish, a lot of rain. Nice field for here, but only had sheep on it and had been grazed this short for probably the last 15, 20 years. Never any
Hmm.
soil or grass regeneration, just a little bit maybe in the summer be topped. And the other field was even better. It was total marginal land. So we were taking gorse off it. It was right up the mountain. There was water coming out of the hill like there's no tomorrow. By the end of harvesting, we couldn't get up there anymore with the car because it's a Land Rover, like the wheels would just spin like mad. That was really marginal land. Now, we did fertilize it, so we brought up mushroom compost. Spent mushroom compost is kind of a little bit of a new experimental way of fertilizing your land. The really good thing is that it's got organic matter, which is the massive thing missing in chemical fertilizers. And organic matter turns out to be one of the most important things in delivering your nutrients to your plant. And it also has slow release nitrogen. So it's got 8 kilos of nitrogen in it, but it's slowly given to your field over time. So we put mushroom compost on it last year. It'll be giving nitrogen for as long as 8 or 3 or 5 years. Who knows? But this is all because I'm a little bit hippie. I didn't want to go with industrial or chemical fertilizers. So we went with mushroom compost on this marginal land on this other hill. We did plow and we did harrow. And we ended up having to do it twice, not the ploughing, just the harrowing, because we sowed too early. But this is just an example of how it can grow on absolutely terrible land and still get good yields from people who are doing it the first time and have no idea what they're doing. So I was growing it with a bunch of farmers. They're amazing, such good crack. It was lovely to work with them. But again, they have never grown a tillage crop. I'm not a farmer at all. And so that means I had even less idea, and all I had was a load of enthusiasm. And yet we managed to get hemp to grow. So I would take that as sort of proof that it can grow anywhere, so long as it's not waterlogged soil or just stones. It'll grow if you give it a chance and if you fertilize right. People will say you should put it in your best soil, though. If you're growing it on your farm, don't go being like, sure, look, that's the place where the sheep never go. I'll stick it there and see what happens. That's definitely not what you should do. But yeah, there's lots of potential for it to be used in small fields on small farms. Why not? I think everyone's kind of going, sure, if it's tillage, we leave it to the lads in Wexford and Waterford and let them at it. People with bigger fields or with the tillage regime already set up. Say harvesting is tough when you don't have a combine harvester in the area or in the county because no one grows large scale tillage crops. So that's another thing. Growing can be done everywhere. Harvesting, not so much.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And can you eat hemp? Because obviously food sovereignty is a thing. I see
Yeah.
some hemp, I don't know, in like, hemp seeds, for example,
Yep.
but I guess is there any uses for it within our food industry?
Yes. Okay, so there's a lot of potential for oils, for hemp seed oil to be used, but they say it doesn't work well with heating, so it's not a frying oil. It'd be used in whatever salads or coatings or dressings. But then hemp seeds, like you're saying, have massive potential as a supplement, as you use them in bread, in baking. They have a very high magnesium content, so people will use them to relieve aching joints and that sort of thing. They're a very healthy seed, but in terms of making flour or something, it's not that kind of crop. It's more beneficial in the industrial side. The food side is a wonderful added boon. And hemp seeds are used in mainly in seed mixes. You get them in Tesco or Lidl or something. You get a seed
Mm,
mix, hemp seeds in there.
cool.
So yeah, there's potential there. The one problem is they have a hull, a really crunchy hull. Some people
Hmm.
don't like that, so there's a machine that takes that off, and then you've
Yeah,
got a
you
lovely.
usually you'll see
And
on the
they're
packet like
packed.
hold hemp seeds and whatnot
Yes,
that
that's it.
you can
Hold hemp
use.
seeds.
Yeah,
They're the job because
very
the
good.
crunchy bit is annoying.
And so, what is the industry like in Ireland? You just don't. I'm sorry, but the dairy farmers
Yes.
and get all the and the beef farmers, they get all the limelight, and you just never hear about the hemp farmers. Are there
Yeah.
many? And like, what's the industry like? Do we have to export it, or is it being sold here?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm with the Hemp Cooperative Ireland. So what they're doing is they're trying to link farmers with industry. So they're sort of trying to create the value chains that will eventually let hemp be a large scale crop and let hemp products be bought and sold among people in the normal way that other products are done. Because right now we have willing farmers. So there's about 250 members of the co-op, and there was, I think it was 70 applications, 77 license applications to grow hemp. So you need a license to grow it, which means that there were 77 farmers, that acreage was 251 hectares in 2021, which isn't much. You need about
Mhm.
4,000 acres, which is maybe 2,000 hectares to even show up on the Department of Agriculture's radar.
Oh,
So right now, yeah, oh, absolutely, it's like someone growing crocuses. It's not a big deal at all. So they're in contact with the co-op, which is great. It's very exciting. But they're saying, look, if you want to become a proper crop, proper market, you need to be growing more acres, which is what we're really trying to do. We're trying to get people to experiment with it, to start getting the knowledge that you need to create these value chains. So one of the big problems in the Irish scene is that there's no processing facilities. It's all cottage industry. It's you're the farmer, you're also the processor, and you're trying to find a buyer. So that's not the way it is with dairy or with beef or with mutton, nothing, or lamb. You're always bringing your product, your animal, your plant, whatever it is, to someone who will do the processing for you.
mhm.
Unless it's, there's loads of little cottage industries where you're trying to keep the value closer to home, but on a large scale, no one's a butcher and a farmer in the mainstream. But in hemp, that's how it has to be at the moment because it's still all so small. So
Mm.
there's people growing for CBD, for flour, and that's an even more restrictive market. You have to be processing it at home, so that ties you to home. Setting up your own processing facility, someone can't set up an outside facility for you for hemp flowers. That's all very limited, restricted. For processing fiber or shiv, you need to set up a massive plant. So you're looking at 5 to 10 million investment to set that up. So these people need to see that there's
So, if
buyers
there's
for their products.
any investors that listen to this with 5 million to
To
spare,
10 million. Absolutely, get the word out there. We're looking for an industrial hemp processing plant. But there's things moving. There's people who are building these facilities. So there's two potential sites in Ireland. But whether that goes ahead all depends on whether the farmers are there to grow the crop and whether the buyer is there on the other side to
yeah.
buy the decorticated hemp. Someone needs to make insulation, someone needs to make plyboard, all of these things need to come together. And it's chicken and egg. Everyone's saying that in the hemp scene, it's a chicken and egg situation where how do you get the farmers to grow when there's no one to process it? And how do you get someone to make a facility when they can't buy any hemp and they can't sell any hemp?
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
really annoying. And yet again, we've got another bloody cheese processing factory after being given the green light in
Yeah.
Kilkenny, and you're like, has anyone heard of climate change in the government, in the department? Like,
You
come
know,
on. Oh,
yes, this is refreshing. Yes,
it's
I completely
so
agree.
frustrating. But it's so good to hear that, a cooperative like the hemp co-op exists. So you're a lot of members who are trying to, obviously help each other and encourage farmers to,
Yes.
I guess, try hemp. And say if there's a farmer listening, or I'm a farmer, how would you, if they had got a bit of land,
Mhm.
what would you say to them to be like, come try the hemp train?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So first thing I'd say is look up the hemp co-op and get in contact with them, which might be me. If you're living in Connacht, I run the Connacht Hub with another board member. If you're elsewhere, it'll be someone else. So there's 8 board members. And what they would do is give you advice and send you in the right direction for licensing, which is the most tricky step of hemping, I would say, because for me, I hate paperwork. I'm not good at it. It takes me a while to get used to it. So licensing was the hardest part. You sort your way through that, and then you order your seed, which can be done with the co-op, but it might be a touch late for this year. Then I would suggest going to a farm. If you're in touch with the co-op, there will be lots of people who are willing to let you come over and see, or to chat, or to have a Zoom call. That's so helpful. That's what we did in our first year. Even though we did it in winter, there was no hemp, but there was a guy there who had grown hemp in this soil. So that was definitely hands-on. And then think about what you want to do with it. So you've talked to the board members and you've decided, I'll just grow it for the crack. I'm just going to experiment. I'm not going to bother with harvesting. I'll just cut it down with a mower. Or you're saying, no, I'm going to grow 5 acres for fiber and I'm going to go with this. That's really important to work out before. So yeah, that's what I'd say. Look at licensing, look at your land, look at why you want to do it, and get in touch with the co-op, because that's how you meet people. That's how I met
Yeah.
people. It was fantastic.
Yeah, and if you feel like you've got a village around you, even through your computer, you'll be more likely to
Yeah,
kind of stick it through with that kind of support. And how can
definitely.
people, I mean, are there ways people can support the co-op? I mean, I rent in Dublin. I'm not a farmer, but I would love to kind of support the industry. So how can people who aren't farmers help? I don't know if there's any kind of campaigns or whatnot, but yeah, how can other people help get hemp on more, onto more acres here?
If you wanted to get involved with skills that you have in the hemp cooperative events or anything like that, we're always open for this. If you are a researcher and you're looking at researching anything related to hemp or value chains or business or setting up rural enterprises, all of this stuff is fantastic. If you have knowledge of how to get funding from Enterprise Ireland or anybody, these are people can always help us with whatever skills they have. If you are a graphic designer and you really wanted to help the co-op, you could join in with that. A really good thing is to become a member. So becoming a member of the co-op feeds into what funds are available for the co-op and also how many people we have in the group. So there's a mobilized group where people share ideas and there's posts going up, and the more people are in there, the more chance it is that if someone says, look, I've got this problem, does anyone know a solution? The more chance there is that someone will say, yes, I live in Dublin and I know this, that, and the other. And that's the way, definitely.
Cool. So you can
Every
become a
skill is useful.
member even if you're not a farmer. You can become a member of the co-op.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I joined as a non-farmer. There's architects, there's, like I said, graphic
And
designers,
now look at you.
IT
Ha ha
guys.
ha.
Okay, scrabbling my way to the top. I'll be queen before you know it. But this is it. There's so much opportunity because it's such a young enterprise. It's such a young co-op. It's such a young industry as a whole. What the hell is hemp? It's all starting here. It's so much fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I'll include like all the socials and the website and everything that people can
Yes, that'd be
find
great.
it. But yeah, we've kind of talked about the obstacles, but I mean the lack of, I guess, processing infrastructure and the fact that you're not really on the department's kind of radar. But have you found much kind of people being fearful of it, or not wanting to be associated with hemp? Are there any kind of obstacles around that?
Okay, well that's good. Firstly, the department is being fantastic. They're in contact with the co-op, and it is coming onto the radar, which is brilliant.
That's
That's
good.
huge for
That's good.
co-op, the work they've been doing. Exactly. No, so hopefully now there'll be some movement. But there is one big, massive problem for the hemp industry, and that is relating to CBD, which is a cannabinoid found in the hemp plant, same as THC, but it's not psychoactive. So they're both in hemp specifically industrial hemp, very little THC and loads of CBD. Depending on which one you grow, there's more or less CBD. And there's an issue where the license you get says it's grand to have a hemp plant in the field with 0.2% THC in it. But when you make a product and it has 0.2% THC or maybe more because you've refined an oil, the Gardaí have a zero tolerance on THC. So when you put that on a shelf, the shop owner is in massive trouble. Their stuff gets seized. It counts as a drug. It's a Misuse of Drugs Act has zero tolerance for THC. So if you're making anything with the flowers, anything at all, firstly, you can't make tea. Tea is not allowed because it's the whole flower. So you're selling the flower from your farm. That's not allowed to happen. You have to destroy it on site. So if you're trying to make a CBD oil, there's no way to do it. You're being shackled from the start.
What the heck? I mean, I have CBD oil from the UK that I recently started taking to see if it would help with kind of anxiety and PMS and stuff. And so how does that exist then? Is it just that in the UK, I think it is a British brand that I have, that they're not like the guards or the police over there haven't got that kind of really strict thing about the flower? Or they do? Oh.
Yeah, I was on their website actually earlier today. I'm looking into it, and they have a zero tolerance policy as well. So they have been trying to change something. They've been looking into ways to standardize the amount of THC. So there's multiple ways of checking what has no effect on the body, what has a little effect on the body, what's the lowest detectable effect of THC on the body. And so they try to say you can have this much in your product, and if you seize a product with that in it, it's not a problem. But the police or the Gardaí can't take it. But okay, we'll call them the police. The Gardaí, that's not being changed, it's not being looked at. So that's what they're calling the lacuna in the law. There's a bunch of articles about that as well, because that's a huge problem for anyone trying to make CBD oils. The same thing with licenses in the UK. The farmer is technically not allowed to use the flowering tops, they call them. So that includes the leaves. Can't use those.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got to change. And I think it is changing because Germany is legalizing, or at least decriminalizing, marijuana. So this means their food safety authority has to change the way that they deal with cannabis products, and they're loosening up on CBD because everybody is fairly tight on it. So this means the European Food Safety Authority is trying to get everybody in the same boat. Cool. They don't like when one's different than the other and it's all a bit of a mess. So I think they're going to start slowly changing. So obviously the UK is outside that now, so who knows what they'll do.
Well, that would be good now, in fairness. I mean, I also wouldn't be against decriminalising marijuana. And if that got us closer to, improving hemp farming, I'd be all for that.
I mean, in the future, if that happened, hemp farmers would know how to grow that crop, and it would be a matter of adjusting to different crops. So if that happened in the future, that would be great. Right now, it's illegal, so not going to happen.
Yeah, but sure, hopefully there'll be changes to make it a little bit easier to grow hemp, because it seems to just be a bit of a no-brainer for so many things, which is pretty cool.
Totally.
And I'd say I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface as to its uses and stuff like that. But
absolutely. I mean, you could talk for hours about the uses and the environmental benefits with the carbon sequestration and green building, all of these things.
So Freya, before we get to some random questions to close the interview off, is there anything else that you would like to share yourself to listeners? It could be anything at all, even yourself, not related to farming. Any other suggestions that you might have for people or thoughts?
I would say that people are quite stressed at the moment, that there's a lot of craziness going on, that people are worried about food insecurities and all of these things. And I'm observing a lot of kind of useless turmoil. I'm saying useless because nothing can be done with that. We're all watching what's going on in Ukraine, and we're hearing, okay, we need to grow food because there's nothing there. And I would say, I don't know, people should meditate and be present and try to sort of be aware. I know this is completely different, but this is what I was observing today among my colleagues and co-workers. We're all talking in circles about something that we can't do, and it's good to find something you can do. Maybe if you wanted to look at food foresting or growing hemp or anything, like I said before, get in touch with the co-op if you would like to help in any way, or if you would like to grow your own fruit and vegetables, sure, take a whack at it. I grew vegetables on a balcony in Dublin when I was living there. It was terrible. It didn't work at all, but it was good. It was something to kind of
something to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm making compost in buckets and I'm living for the
fantastic.
worms who have found their way there. I'm like, how did you, like, the bucket was on
Yes,
concrete for so long and I'm like, how did you find this bucket?
yes.
And so even though I don't really have much to do with the compost, it's so exciting. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, I think it was Blind Boys, I'm not sure, and there was something in it about this worrying. And,
Mhm.
there's useful worrying, like thinking, okay, I
Yeah,
have to worry to remind myself to pay rent and just be kind of wary that money in my account isn't mine. Okay.
yeah,
But to repeatedly kind of think about it or to worry about something in the future that you don't really have control of, ask yourself,
yeah.
is this useful right now?
Totally.
Is
What's
this,
that quote
yeah,
about knowing what you can change and what is within your control and separating the two and all this lovely stuff?
yeah,
But yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking there. If you want to try and do something, it's so nice to look close to home. What can I do here with my hands to make you feel like I
exactly.
really did something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With your hands, especially if it's in some microbes that make you happier. But
Totally. Worms
yeah,
on the. I love
that's
that worms in the
lovely.
bucket story. Fantastic. Good woman.
Well, thank you so much for that tip. I guess to finish off, we're going to ask some random questions right now, Freya. If you want to pick a letter of the alphabet, because I chose letters rather than numbers, just cause, and there'll be a random question associated to it.
I went with A. It's the first one.
Hey, oh, interesting. Where in the world would you teleport to first? So you've got some carbon-free travel here. Where would you go?
Do Patagonia. I would
Patagonia.
want to go to those peaks down there and check out some of those crazy glaciers and mountains and oh my gosh, yeah.
Wow, straight away Patagonia. That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
never. There's so many places I need to go.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good one. All
So many
right.
places. There you go.
Another letter.
C.
C.
I'm
If
sticking to the front of the alphabet. Not going
that's okay. The end is
not going
scary.
too far.
That's
We'll go with
okay.
C, exactly.
If you could look into the future as it's going to be, would you do it?
Yes.
Would you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I'd love to be a fly on the wall. I can't wait to see what we're like in 500 years. What would we be
Yeah.
like? What's going to happen? I haven't a
Yeah.
clue. But sure, it might be class. I mean, we might be looking at the future going,
Yeah.
God, we actually made it. You know, it could
That is,
happen.
yeah,
And
that's so true.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it's so true. It'd be so interesting to see. I'd love to. I don't think I could resist not looking like.
no,
Yeah,
I know
that'd be
you'd be
really
so
interesting.
curious.
And one more letter.
J.
J. Which three fictitious characters are on your apocalypse team?
Oh my gosh, my apocalypse team. Okay. Well, have you read Inkheart?
No.
It's a German book, but there's a dude in there who's super cool. I think in English he's called Dustfinger. Very cool
Just
guy. I'd be hanging out with him. He always
cool.
wears a nice long coat. He can hang out with fire, that sort of stuff. Who else is a nice
Deadly.
fictitious character? Gosh, I mean, I'm trying to pick people who are good crack now because I don't want to hang out with someone
I
boring for the whole
Just
time.
yeah, I asked
Yeah,
someone this the other day, and they were like, "Oh, you need someone to make you laugh." Like I'm like, "Oh
yeah,
gosh, yes."
totally. Yeah, you need someone funny. Gosh, I don't want to pick someone too fast. I mean, I might go with Lucky Luke.
Who's
He's
Lucky
great
Luke?
crack. Oh my gosh, he's like a comic from the 1980s or something.
Oh,
He's
sorry,
this crazy cowboy.
I just never got into
Oh
comics at all. Okay, so Lucky Luke
gosh.
is another one.
Lucky Luke's another one. You should. I grew up with three older siblings, and they had all these comics. I don't even maybe even from my parents. They're tattered and they're hilarious. That guy'd make you laugh now.
Oh, very
Jesus.
good.
Yeah, there you go. So he's good crack. I've got the
Cool.
random people here now. Some sort of Morgan Freeman. I feel like he's very calming.
Yeah.
You know, he'd be able to handle whatever. Morgan
He
Freeman in anything.
yeah, he just exudes chill, calm energy as well. And
Yeah,
then but can also
he'd
like
be
scare
brilliant.
off people if you need him to.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be smart enough. Maybe Morgan Freeman in is it Seven? No, Zodiac. Or no, Seven. It is Seven.
I think it's
Some
7.
horrible
Yeah.
murder thing. It's
Yeah.
Seven. Yeah,
Yeah,
him in
yeah,
that. He's very very good in that. He's a bit dark,
yeah.
but that's fine. It's the apocalypse.
But
I've
that's
got
great.
Lucky Luke. He's
He's
happy.
able to deal with what's going on. Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty good. Your apocalypse scene sounds like great crack altogether. I'll have to try and find you.
I know you should
Um
hang out with us. We'd have a great time. In 500 years, when we've gone to the future because we chose
Yes,
to.
with our hemp backpacks and our insulated,
Absolutely.
the whole world went on fire and all that was left standing was all the insulated hemp houses.
Yes,
Guys, like we're literally telling you.
absolutely. Don't worry.
Freya, thank you so, so much for this chat. It's been an absolute pleasure and best of luck
It
on
has.
the hemp cooperative journey. But yeah, thank you so much for this. It's been
Yes.
great.
Thank you so much. It has actually been very lovely. You're a kindred soul, and I'm so glad you're doing this work. It's brilliant. And you're great crack. You're on my apocalypse team as well.
Yay! Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Book of Leaves. Don't forget, if you want to get in touch with Freya or the Hemp Cooperative Ireland, you can check out the show notes for links to their website and social media. That should be available on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. And if it's not there, you can always check out my website, bookofleavespodcast.com, where everything is fully linked. And they also had an event in Dublin recently on the 8th of April. So they all met lots of different, loads of different people that were interested in hemp were there, including lots of co-op members and everything. So yeah, get in touch and support them if you can, even if you're like me, you're not a farmer but just interested in the industry. So we've a long way to go, but it's interesting, I think, to know where we are and where we stand at the moment. And yeah, they could really use our support. As always, don't forget to recommend this podcast to a friend, share it on social media, leave a review, and you can support it on Patreon or buymeacoffee.com as well. Okay, I'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks' time for episode 64. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.